One of the things that tends to mess us up reading the Bible is the difficulty of really seeing time in it. Like sometimes these stories aren't even necessarily in chronological order. The storytelling in the culture where this was written down was more focused on the significance of an event, not necessarily the order they happened or how much time passed in between. And that's why we have some things like, you know, there's no data for us to quantify like when this happened. We know it's somewhere in this 30-year period of this person's life. And those kind of things, they make it harder to see the humanity, to see those real people in there. And that makes it real hard for us to relate to them and feel like we're anything like them. That's how we end up looking at these people in Bible stories as like these great heroes that have some supernatural faith that we just can't attain. And that's not the case at all. They're real people just like us. And it helps when you can start to recognize and look for it and see, passage of time. Because there are things where God makes some great promise, and in the very next verse is when it's fulfilled. But there's years that happened in between those two sentences. Or I just heard a preacher last week saying that sometimes when you turn the page in your Bible, you're turning decades of time. Or there's stuff that we look at and it's like, man, I've heard people talk about the book of Acts that, oh, there was so much going on and there's these miracles and God's doing amazing things and so much happening and, oh, I wish it could be like that today. And it's like, really look at the book of Acts? That covers a period of like 30 to 40 years. And so when you take the number of miracles in there distributed across 40 years, they're not that often. And also then it gets even bigger than that because it's covering so many different cities and different parts of the world. It's the entire known world of the time. And so it's spread across so many lives that those miracles are actually incredibly rare. And that's kind of the point. That's why we call them miracles. If these things happened all the time, it would just be Tuesday. But it's a miracle because it's special and it doesn't happen all the time. And we have a hard time seeing time, but that time is essential because the gap between, when God speaks and like tells you to do something, when he makes a promise or gives an instruction to somebody, and then the other side, the end of the story after everything has worked out, that middle time is crucial. That's the real life. And that's the part that's where we live. Because I'm no great, super faith giant or whatever, but I've actually experienced, a time or two in my life where God told me to do something and I did it and it worked out and other people were impressed and like, oh, so amazed with the faith and obedience to do that. But again, all they see is the tiny little snippet. They see the beginning and the end and don't see any of the middle. Because I can tell you on my side of the story, like looking at it from the inside instead of the outside, it's a whole lot different. And what they don't see, what's not nearly as impressive, is the days and weeks and months of going back and forth and second guessing and questioning, like, is this really what God is saying? Like, I want to be sure I'm getting it right. And there's one of my early mentors talked about that even if you hear me saying like God told me to do this, at best it's like 67% sure that that's what God said, because it never gets to be in this 100% rock solid certainty. We're all doing our best here and we try to follow God and you listen to God and do what he says, but even that is just like, okay, I'm pretty sure he's saying this and I'm going to take a step in that direction and see what happens. And that's how it goes. And that wrestling through the second guessing, the questioning, like, oh, what would that mean for my family? And would God tell me to do that? That sounds kind of crazy. And then even once you start moving, it's like, oh, are we making a mistake? And, should we have a backup plan in case this doesn't work out? But that's the real life. That's humanity. But that's also an essential, I don't know, we'll call it an exercise because it strengthens you. That's how your faith gets stronger, when you fight through that. Because when you don't lean into it, when you don't take the time to push through and fight through that, then you never develop a stronger faith. You never get to the point where God can tell you something else and you can go, well, I know that, he said this before and I listened and it worked out. It's only when you can wrestle through it that you can get stronger. And It's only when we can see that the people in the Bible, in these famous stories, really did have to wrestle through it, that we can see, oh, well, then I can too. When all you do is look at the highlights, when you see God said and everything worked out and miss all of the real life humanity in the middle, then this becomes, a cute story, a lofty ideal that might be nice if someone could attain to, but it doesn't become reality. And the Bible isn't going to change you until it's real life.